So I know we wanted to share some differences and similarities in networking skills. So I'll turn it over to you, Michael. And,
Yeah. Well, Bruce, thank you for having me. And it's interesting, as we've talked, over the last 6 months, 9 months,
mhm.
For me, it's been really interesting to watch how people have adapted to where, prior to what I affectionately refer to as the debacle, prior to COVID, I did a lot of face-to-face networking. That was my primary mode of networking. Did a fair amount here on LinkedIn on the platform.
Mhm.
With the idea of turning it into a phone call or a face-to-face conversation or a coffee. And then as the situations changed, it was figuring out how to adapt. And one of the things that we found, I lead and host a middle market networking group here in Cleveland,
Mhm.
was figuring out how do we shift from face-to-face events to virtual events.
Mhm.
And I'd say initially it was once people got over the hurdle of, oh, what do I look like on Zoom? It was great. It was a fantastic way to keep in touch with people. And as the situations evolve, here in Ohio, we're able to do small group, 15 to 20 people, socially distant, masks.
Mhm.
But it allows us to see each other face to face. And being that we are in a temperate climate, we know that in another month or two, weather conditions are going to become what they are. So having come full circle, face to face, virtual, back to face, as we move forward, having the ability to network virtually again and stay connected. Really, I think it's a silver lining of the situation that we've found ourselves in.
Right. Yeah. So, like you, I'm actually a LinkedIn local host, which was face to face, and I had just managed to get my new group kicked off like literally 10 days before. I love that word debacle. People. So I'm gonna borrow that one if I may. So.
Well, please do.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know about you, but what have you found are some of the main differences and maybe advantages, Michael, for people, putting them through the adaptation, because it's a tough learning curve for some of us. So
it has, and initially, what I would say, Bruce, is I think it was a magnifier in terms of the people that tended to be withdrawn became more withdrawn.
mm-hmm.
And the people who tended to be more outgoing became even more outgoing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, speaking for myself, as we went from March into April and April into May, I developed what I like to think is a best practice of, hey, if somebody popped in my head, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to give them a call.
Mm-hmm.
In days prior to the debacle, I would have said, oh, I need to call Steve. I need to call Sean. They would have gone on a list. And at some point, I may or may not have gotten to them where, kind of the nature of, hey, somebody popped in my head. Maybe it's for a reason. I'm going to pick up the phone. If for no other reason to say, hey, Sean, how are you doing? In what ways can I be of service? Is there anything you need? Mm-hmm. Just to really remind people, especially those people who are kind of, physically and maybe spiritually on lockdown, that there's somebody else out there that's thinking about that.
Right. Well, it's interesting you use your intuition that way. I find that I do the same. I don't always pick up the phone, but what I will do is I'll jot down that person's name, and very often I'll send them a text or a quick LinkedIn. As you know, Michael, is my predominant platform, so I use LinkedIn messaging a lot to keep in touch. So,
right.
And that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the magnifying effect because That's probably why I find it so painful, because I'm a behavioral introvert by by all the studies that I do, and I tell people I've had to become highly trained extrovert to be more outward going. So,
well, and it's interesting, Bruce, because I think in some ways it parallels the idea of active communication versus passive communication. In that, email, even text, is passive communication. The classic example of the difference between active communication and passive communication is asking somebody the question, hey, would you email the fire department if your house was on fire? Right? And the answer is no. Okay,
right.
So the idea is, if something is important, if something is urgent, if something is critical, it's picking up the phone. If you're in the same building, it's getting out of your chair and going walking and speaking to that person, and actively, putting forth the effort to create a communication being a two-way dialogue, not just somebody yelling and hoping somebody else is hearing. So throughout the debacle, it's okay, how can I actively communicate, especially when I want to reach out and find out how someone is doing.